Welcome to Suddenly Different, where we explore stories and strategies for life when it doesn't go to plan. I'm Leigh-Anne Sharland, inviting you to join me on this journey. Sometimes the most confronting mirror we'll ever face is the one that shows us both who we've been and who we could become. For Ashley Jo Janssen, that mirror took the form of two eulogies. The first, written from the depths of addiction, reflected pain, loss, and a quiet exhaustion from trying to hold it all together. The second, a vision of healing, forgiveness, faith, and purpose, revealed the woman she could become if she chose sobriety and grace. That choice became Ashley's suddenly different moment. The turning point between destruction and redemption. In her memoir, Tides of Great Waves of Grace, Ashley Jo invites us into the raw and sacred territory of recovery, the heartbreak of loss, the rebuilding of trust, and the daily decision to forgive herself, her past, and others. She reminds us that true transformation doesn't happen in isolation. It unfolds through family who show up, communities that hold us, and faith that steadied us when we falter. Before we begin, a gentle note. This conversation includes references to addiction, grief, and recovery. Please take care while listening and pause if it becomes heavy. Because, as Ashley Jo reminds us, even in the darkest tides, there is always grace. And today, she's sharing not just how she found it, but how she learned to live it with forgiveness, community, and her signature razzle-dazzle spirit that brightens every room or Zoom she walks into. Ashley Jo, it is such an honor to welcome you to Suddenly Different. And already I've called you Ashley and Ashley Jo. So which one shall we choose for today?
We can go with Ashley. And Leigh-Anne, thank you so much for having me. It's a blessing to be here.
It is so good. You are my first American guest on my podcast.
Love it. Love it.
Let us get into this deeply personal and really important conversation about the things that happen in your life as a result of the trauma in your life. So take us back to that moment, writing your own eulogy, not once, but twice. What did each one reveal about the life you were living and the one that you longed for?
Yes, such a good question and such a heavy question, yet beautiful one. First, I wrote my eulogies while I was doing an intensive outpatient program for substance abuse. And so the first eulogy that I had to write for myself, it's like day 2 in the program, right? And so I'm like, they're just coming at me hard and heavy saying, you need to write your eulogy as though your life ended because of substance abuse. And so that was hard to do. And it was difficult to sit and kind of face where my life had taken me and what my life had become and look in the mirror and say, you know, the reason I am here is because there was a distinct possibility that addiction and alcoholism could have ended my life. And so I had to face, if I choose that path, what does that look like? And so for me, that eulogy ended up being a bit of the things I wish I had done and I wish that I had said in life. And it was a hard look in the mirror that, like, I had a choice. These wishes could become reality. And I think that's why they had me do it, right? Is because if my life had ended because of substance use disorder, that's a dark and not good path. But I had this pivotal moment where I got to decide, is that how I want my story to end? And is this the eulogy that I want to be read as people are sitting in my funeral? Or do I want to choose a different path? And I get to choose that, not anybody else, only me. And if I choose that path, then later in my program, they had me write that eulogy of what my life would have been like if I lived a long and prosperous life and died at a ripe old age, right? And so it was a beautiful juxtaposition of the death, disease, and destructive path filled with heartbreak and sorrow, and then the path and the choice that is filled with beauty and life and vulnerability and living.
I, what an amazing technique. And I wonder, because when you told me about it, I sort of put myself in your shoes a little bit, which is kind of what I do. And I imagined the perspective of my family, right? Because I was thinking, I've lost both my parents and my brother, and I was thinking through the process of writing a eulogy. And you talk to the family, and you think about, you reminisce about the different things that happened, and you do talk about the joys and the sadness and the and 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 those you wish, those regrets. We really, really talk about regrets. And I kind of thought, I wonder whether you put yourself in your children's shoes or your husband's shoes.
For sure. I absolutely did. And I think what's so interesting, Leigh-Anne, is like reading that first eulogy that I wrote, I started off with the things I so desperately needed to believe about myself in that moment. Because I was in such a dark place. And I started out with those things, the positive things, right? That we all like, I always say in death, we share the best memories of people, right? That's just how we are. But I started out with the things I desperately needed to believe about myself. And then I had to go to the other end of the table and put myself in the position of my kids. At that moment in time, I was a single mom with 3 kids, and say, what what would they want to be said, or what would they want to be different? It is very interesting because even the eulogy where my life ended because of substance use disorder, it ended up being spun in a very positive way, because in that moment, what I was thinking is I don't ever want anyone to have to go through this. I
Yes.
don't ever want anyone to get to the depths of despair and darkness that I'm at, where their kids have to hear a eulogy being read. And so it very much was like, here are all the things Ashley did not say during her life that had she, this is the story you would have heard and what you would have known about her. You would have known that even though she gives off this strong, powerful razzle dazzle, I am Ashley, hear me roar, that behind that mask, there was a struggle. It's both the power and the passion and a struggle. And I think so often in life, we think it's one or the other, and we don't see a world where you can see in both black and white and shades of gray and vivid color. They all exist in the full spectrum of our human experience. And so I wrote them both positively because I needed to know that in my pain, whether it ended in the dark path or the good path, the bad path or the great path, right? That in that pain, there was purpose somewhere behind it all.
Yeah. So you had that purpose. You really so you could see your soul in both of them.
Hmm.
You could see different actions and different outcomes, but 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 you could see in both of them that your soul, your being, the true self of you was there in both. That's many people. It is not my place to say most, but many people would never have even thought about that. You
Hmm.
know, they would just have gone on with the drudgery of life
Hmm.
and the similarity of each day being similar to the other, and and quickly forgetting the joy.
Mhm.
But yeah,
I think
that's
the
really
beauty
cool.
of the exercise, though, is that it led me back to who I am innately inside of my heart, right? Like, even the bad one led me back
Yeah,
to finding
yeah.
myself. Like, what's the story you wanna leave here? What's the legacy? What do you want people to know? And that for me gave me like a purpose and a reason to live, to be fully transparent, because addiction steals everything from you, everything, including your heart, right? Including your soul. And so for me to be led through this exercise and find that's who I am. That's Ashley. That's the legacy I want to live. And guess what? I'm here. I'm breathing. I'm doing this hard, horrible exercise that nobody wants to do of writing their own eulogy. But that means I still get to choose life or death.
Choice, powerful thing. So when you compared the two,
Hmm.
you've already probably answered this. When you compare the two, what shifted inside you? And how did that realization change the direction of your life? So, what actions did you take?
So honestly, the biggest difference between the two is just when life ended. And I think that's the piece I would want people to know is like, in that, I still found who I was, who I am. It's just in one, there was a choice that meant that life ended early. And that meant a lot of sorrow and a lot of tears and a lot of like out of the normal flow of life's patterns for my family, for my friends, for people that I didn't get to, leave my full legacy to. But in the core of it, I was still there. It's just with one of them, I wasn't able to be vulnerable and fully embrace my journey and my story and live it out all the way to the end. And with the other one, I was able to look in the mirror, see the person that's there, and say, you know what? Some crap has happened and I am in a place that I am not proud of, right? I'm going to face myself in the mirror and I'm going to say that, but I'm going to own it. And then from this day forward, I'm going to keep putting one foot in front of the next and keep doing better. And there are going to be setbacks and there are going to be things that I'm going to need to overcome. And there are going to be hard moments in life, but I can own my truth that I can be powerful and strong and beautiful and incredible and wonderful and amazing and hurt and broken and grieving and struggling both at the same time. But in the one where I decided to really own that both can exist, that equated to a long, beautiful life where there was a legacy left that wasn't a legacy because of how a eulogy was being told, because of how someone's life ended. It was a legacy because it's like, wait, give me that paper back. I'm not ready. Let's rewrite this story and let's keep moving and have this legacy be while I'm still here.
Yeah. You definitely are, girl. So, forgiveness often feels impossible at the
Mhm.
beginning, right? How did you find the courage to forgive yourself and others? And what role did that play, that forgiveness part, play in your healing?
Forgiveness is so hard, right? It's so incredibly hard. But I think personally, self forgiveness is one of the hardest roads that we can walk. It's absolutely one of the hardest roads that we can walk because we often hold a standard that's way up here for ourselves and a standard that's like kind of here, a normal human standard for everyone else. And so for me, self forgiveness, Leigh-Anne, is the most imperative part of my journey. I had to, and it started with admitting where things had gotten, right? So for me, there were some rough moments where I was not able to fully be the mom that my kids deserve because of my alcoholism. I was not able to be the friend that my friends deserve. I was not able to be the sister that my sister deserves, right? And step one to self forgiveness was admitting that that was my reality. I had done some crappy things and gotten myself to a pretty bad place, right? But the second I could step out of my turtle shell that I had made for myself, just being a recluse, and look in the mirror and say, okay, this is my reality. that was the first step to being able to forgive myself because I had to be willing to admit my current circumstance in order to give myself grace. Because I think I told you this when we were meeting ahead of time. I would hear someone else tell my story from their mouth, and I would be like, oh my goodness, of course that's how life went for you. Like, I'm so sorry, you poor thing. Are you okay? But I hear myself tell my story, and the roommate in my head says, what in the heck is wrong with you? You know better than that. Why did you make those choices? Why weren't you a better mom? Man, your kids sure deserve better. And it's like that little demon sitting on my shoulder, that roommate in my head, just saying, man, Ashley, you suck over and over and over again. And the first step to quieting that voice was admitting where I was. And then from there wasn't a moment where it was like, and that day I forgave myself, right? It
No.
very much was a journey. I spent a year in that intensive outpatient program. It was all done online. So we started talking about technology, talk about the beauty of technology. I was a single mom and I could get help for addiction online. Beautiful, beautiful thing. But I went to therapy every single week. I did my homework every single week. I looked back at my past, at my childhood. I looked at the loss that I'd experienced in life and I faced it all head on. And through that, like facing every micro trauma head on, I started to realize that that grace that I would give my best friend if she had my story, that I really deserved it too. And that was how I began to forgive myself, was by putting myself in someone else's shoes, which it sounds so weird, but like my therapist said multiple times, Ashley, stop. The words that just came out of your mouth, if your best friend was sitting across from you and said those words, what would you say to her? And I would instantly break down in tears. And I'm like, I would tell her I love her and I understand and everything is going to be okay. And he said, then start telling yourself that. And so I'd go through these exercises of saying, like, Ashley, I love you. I understand and everything's going to be okay. And it's just like slowly over time, it's the power of affirmations. Really, I started to believe that that was true. It's like every day in my recovery, I got a little bit stronger. I felt a little bit more confident. And I slowly started realizing that the life that I wanted and the self forgiveness I needed to give to myself was not only within reach, Leigh-Anne, but it was happening.
It is so wonderful because when we're unable to forgive ourselves, then even if the people around us are not holding it against us, they're forgiving us, they're loving us no matter what, unconditionally and everything, we don't accept it because there's a level of deservability that it's like, well, actually, my assessment of me deserving forgiveness is that I don't. So, well, you're all wrong because, I need a bit more, sort of punishment for this because, I did wrong. And, things that happen for you. And I know that you've got like the number of setbacks and the number of painful occurrences in your life have been, um, you know, beyond anybody's like what they signed up
Mhm.
for when they came onto this planet. It's like,
Right?
hold on, I didn't say I was going to have this and this and this and this and this and this and this. I didn't, right? Hold on, you didn't make this suit big enough. You didn't make my armor strong enough. You didn't, like so and people, people think that choosing to support ourselves through addiction is, like a weakness or anything, but actually we're just fighting to stay alive. We're
Mhm.
just using the tools that we know about. You've
Mhm.
learnt more tools, and so you've got greater awareness of what you can do now.
Mhm.
But, when you're not able to forgive, accept forgiveness and cope, The importance is having the support to be able to learn new ways, live differently, make different choices. My dog is agreeing 100%.
And no, he's like, "Yes, keep going, keep going." You said
Yeah.
something I think is really important. You said, like, as we're looking at grace, we're like, "No, I don't deserve it. I need more punishment." If I really, really, really step back and look at my story from the outside, that's what I was doing, is I was punishing myself. And eventually it started as something I could control, right? In my drinking, my debauchery, but then eventually, addiction got its grips on me and I could no longer control my own self punishment. And when that happened, that self punishment turned inward and became self hatred. And that
Yes.
was what I had to learn to heal from and to forgive and to provide myself with a little bit of grace. Because, like you said, the deck of cards that life gave me, sometimes we create our own destiny. But then there are other times where it's just like, you got a crappy deck of cards.
Yeah.
And you can't really play a good hand. All you have to do is fold here. And for me, that was a bit of my story, right? Now there are absolutely pieces that I chose, but I didn't choose for my son to pass away. I didn't choose a lot of the grief and a lot of the turmoil that I went through when I was still, very young, only 23 years old. And then because micro trauma after micro trauma happened, I never had a moment to just breathe and process through it, because once I made it through one fire, well, then another fire comes up and then another fire comes up. And all of that created like this perfect storm, Leigh-Anne, where like that self hatred and that self punishment just turned into like, I felt like I was living a nightmare and there was no escape. Like I kept trying and trying and trying and it wasn't working.
Yeah. And whether you've got a seemingly societal accepted addiction,
Hmm.
whether you're a workaholic or whether you're a gym junkie or whether you're a running machine, like all of these things, when we do them to excess, when we do them to escape, when the motivation has punishment inside of it, whether it's eating, drinking, drugs, whatever it is, it's difficult. And I know I was an absolute workaholic because
Mhm,
I was definitely certain they were going to find out that I was shit.
mhm.
Like if I didn't work 14 hours a day, if I didn't wasn't online, you know, 24/7, if I didn't take things away on holidays, or if I had a break, something would break and they would find out about me. Don't
Mhm,
you worry about that.
mhm.
But that one bit is a bit hidden, but it could easily have been um, a different choice.
Yeah,
So it's similar strategies that are needed. I don't know whether there's a support body, that a group kind of support thing for Workaholics Anonymous,
right.
because it's more acceptable.
Yeah, for sure, and it's interesting because I would say that's where my, like, addictive behaviors started, was with being a workaholic, and I
Yep.
reached a point of complete and total burnout, actually a point where I couldn't sleep at night, and that was where part of my drinking started, is my
Mm,
brain couldn't shut off, Leanne, right? I was working, working, working all the time. I'd wake up at 11 o'clock and I'd answer emails. I'd answer emails at 2:30 a.m. That is not normal. If you're listening and you're doing that, that is like, get some rest. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
But eventually that turned into, okay, burned out there. Well, now it's the alcohol. And then, Leanne, it's so interesting because you said like an addiction that is accepted by society, right? And workaholism is accepted by society. Well, the other thing that is working out. You mentioned that one too. So when I first got sober, I actually would work out 3 to 5 hours per day. And the thing I said in my head, and my therapist knew, I was very transparent with him, but I kept saying to myself, you can't lose your kids because you're working out too much. You can lose your kids because you're drinking too much. And so for me, working out became like a band-aid to get me from day 1 sober to day 90 sober. And then at day 90, my therapist was like, all right, Ashley, now we're going to tone down the working out. Now that your brain has reached a place where the alcohol isn't screaming anymore, now let's work on getting you to a place where you can be mindful, but you don't need to be working out 3 to 5 hours a day to feel distracted like you're escaping your own life. Let's start facing some of this stuff head on.
Yeah. And social media, like that is another accepted method of getting that dopamine, of getting that feel good hormone because we don't feel good
Yeah.
and we just want to, and our mind isn't letting us. So, what's so important when you're going through things like this is that you have family and community around you. And I know that part of your story, part of the sort of downward part was when that you moved from the area that you lived in when
Hmm.
your child died. You kept moving around America. Let's talk about how important in times like this and when everything fell apart, who are the people that showed up? Who did you let in to allow your recovery?
Hmm.
And how important is that now for you today?
Hmm. So I think in life we all go through seasons, right? And that season when my son was sick and my son passed away, we had an extremely supportive church community and we had an extremely supportive 12-step community. But like you said, we moved away. And with every move, I isolated myself more and more and more, started struggling more and more and more. And so when I finally chose recovery, um, Leanne, honestly, I had very few people that I could be myself with because I had gotten either so good at isolating and just not showing them who I was, or so good at putting a mask up. And this is the Ashley that you're going to see today that, like, by the time I made the courageous choice to get sober, to go to my IOP, I really had like my best friend, my now husband, and my sister. And that was it. Like 3 people is the amount I had isolated myself to, where there were 3 people that I was comfortable going to them and saying, okay, here's where I'm at. Here's the level I've gotten to. And one of the most important things in my early recovery was a level of transparency with me and those people. And so I would leave a session with my therapist and I would pick up the phone, and he knew without fail, I met with my therapist every Tuesday. He knew without fail that I would pick up the phone and call him and I would say, all right, here's what we went through this week. I'd give him the rundown of the session, right? And I'd say, here's what I'm working on this week. Here are my action steps, and here's how you can hold me accountable. And at first, a piece of that was like so hard because it meant exposing, like, we all have these pieces tucked away that, like, we don't want anybody to see. And all of a sudden, I'm going, all right, here's who I am. Take a look, like it or not. This is the truth. But it took me being that vulnerable with the man that I love and not trying to put on a face and pretend to be someone else to really develop such a strong personal connection. And then the other community I was very, very connected to was the online 12-step community, just allowing them to also not only hold me accountable, but Leanne, love me through the process, right? Like, love me on my good days and love me on my bad, and be there to remind me that, like, it's okay. You messed up. It's not the end of the world. Life as we know it is not over. This is just a hiccup. This is just a slip. We didn't fall all the way. Like, it is okay. And so I cannot stress enough the importance of being vulnerable. And I'm not saying not everybody needs to do what I did. They don't all need to write a book and share it with the world, right? Like that's a whole different level of vulnerability. But I believe that every person should have at least 3 people. Brené Brown says, like, we all have like 3 people in our life that we can just be brutally honest and completely and totally ourselves with. And then a group that's on the kind of like the outside of that group where like we can be vulnerable and transparent with them too. But we have to have a community. And when I crawled into my turtle shell and secluded myself from everyone, I had no one but myself. And that was really, really scary. And that was a really, really lonely place. We're not meant to do life alone. We're meant to do life with other humans. And guess what? It may look like on social media that everybody has the perfect house and the perfect life. But I am telling you, Leigh-Anne, the most eye opening thing I have seen since exposing all of my dirty little secrets to the world is that everyone has something going on in their life that
Yes.
they don't either talk about openly or that people don't openly know because they're just ashamed or they're afraid or they don't know how to even start the conversation. Every single person who's heard my story is like, "Oh my gosh, here's what's going on with me." And it's just like these people are now pouring out their like life worries and problems. And I'm like, what a beautiful thing to see us talking about our struggles instead of just highlighting our highlight reel on social media, right? Social media is not real life.
It absolutely is not. And I think, many people who have the immaculate facade are definitely, I question whether they've either done a lot of work or they're good actors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So sobriety isn't just about abstaining. It's about relearning how to feel. So how did you begin to reconnect with your emotions and your body's truth and identifying even the triggers that we feel in our body probably first before we think the thought?
Mm-hmm. I love this question. Just the other day, someone said to me, "Didn't life get so much easier when you got sober?" And I was like, "Oh, heck no. Like, are you kidding me? Easier? When I was drinking, I was numb. I didn't have to feel anything. But when I got sober, all of a sudden, all of these emotions and like this, 30 some years of trauma is coming at me in waves that feel a little bit insurmountable at times. They feel like they're about to take me under at times. And so for me, early sobriety was not easy because suddenly I'm feeling these things that I did not feel before. But what I realized, Leigh-Anne, over time is that what felt really, really scary at over time, it became easier to manage and easier to understand and easier to give myself grace. And I equate it like anybody who's had to step on a stage and do any form of public speaking. Like that moment you're about to get on stage in front of 1,000 people is like, I'm going to freak out a little bit here. But then once you're on stage and you get started, it just gets easier and you just settle into your rhythm. And all of a sudden you're communicating with confidence. And that's what feeling the emotions was like for me. At first, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. I feel like I'm going to puke right now. Right. But then slowly but surely, in giving myself freedom and grace to be frustrated with the process, I realized that I could handle a lot more than I thought I could, and that I could open some doors from my past that seemed really scary and really intimidating. But then when I opened the door, it's like the intimidating part was over and I could face what was there and I could be okay with that. And the other piece, Leigh-Anne, that for me was so imperative is I realized that when we look at the spectrum of human emotion, every emotion holds a counter emotion, right? You don't have love without hate. You don't have joy without sorrow. You don't have courage without fear. And so I realized that by numbing those scary ones, right? By numbing the fear, by numbing the sorrow, I was also numbing the courage and numbing the joy. And all of a sudden I felt them. And even though I felt sorrow, I felt joy. And even though I felt hate, I felt love, because one unlocks the other. It's not one or the other. It is both are here. That's how the world works. And so for me, I had to shift my thinking to seeing the beautiful side of those really, really hard emotions and really, really hard things that we go through. Each horrible emotion holds another emotion that's on the other side that's awesome and amazing and incredible, and that you don't get to experience if you don't allow yourself to feel the negative side of it too.
Yeah. I study philosophy, and one of the things we learnt last week was that everything in front of us, everything that we're experiencing, is our teacher. And if we can let go of the polarity associated, this is a good one, this is a bad one, if we can just allow it to be our teacher and, look at it through different perspectives, don't be so rigid about what it is and how we interpret it, then it is a frequency of energy. So, Ashley, you often talk, or you did talk when we met online, about bringing some razzle dazzle, because you had a sequin jacket on, which was rather impressive, I must say, to your days. But you were explaining to me that with working from home, you decided to put some effort in, and that made a huge difference to your mindset. So bringing that razzle dazzle to your days, that joy, the vibrancy, the external representation of what's possible. What does that look like now, and how does it remind you that life is worth celebrating?
For sure. I think I'll give you two sides to this. I'll give you the totally practical side, and then I'm going to give you the philosophical mindset side. So for me, working from home, I realized quickly that my external appearance became like an inward of how I was feeling. And so what I found is if I just wore pajamas every day or I wore leggings every day and I never changed out of that, I didn't end up feeling really great about myself at any moment in that day. And so for me, I made a conscious decision legitimately. I make sure I work out every day. I make sure I shower every day, and I wear a nice little jacket like this, even if I'm working from home, right? And for me, it's less about that outer appearance and more about the energy that it brings to me and who I am, and the energy that it brings to my day. And so now, like if we're talking razzle dazzle, a nice little sequins jacket, right? For me, that has more to do with how I carry myself. And that is one of the things to me that became very important through my healing journey was what we were talking about earlier, allowing myself to feel those emotions. And so, like, the joke around my house is I'm like a high, low, like, you're always going to know how Ashley is feeling because I make sure that I own whatever that emotion is, not in an unhealthy way, but I speak it and I say, ooh, I'm frustrated right now. Right. And I put a name to it and then I move on from there. But for me right now in the season that I'm in, it's just owning my story with vulnerability, with transparency, with honesty. And then it's showing people that you can have kind of a shit story like I do and still have fun and still be here and be laughing with someone that I've never met outside of on Zoom, right? And having a really, really great time because we can do fun things in life, even if we're handed a really crappy deck of cards sometimes.
Yeah, and the thing is, I've had different teachers, and so one of them has done a PhD about emotion, and the findings they had from that research was that if you fully feel the emotion for 16 seconds, it should then flow on, right? So
Mhm.
16 seconds, not very long. If you allow the emotion, it should flow on because emotion is energy in motion. If it
Mhm.
lasts any longer than that, and because the other theory is 60 seconds, so let's go. If it goes more than a minute, then have a look at the story that you've got associated to that emotion, whether it's the the trigger for the road rage, or whether it's the rude barista, or whether it's the feeling that you're having when you see a homeless person. That story, that's your story. That's your story that you're overlaying with the emotions. So sticking with it for days, decades, whatever it is, however long you choose, there is a choice to these emotions.
Yep. For sure, there is absolutely a choice to these emotions, and I think, if we don't allow ourselves to feel them, we think we're, like, sneaking around them, and
Yeah.
it's like, no, they show up. They will rear like, pop goes the weasel. They're gonna rear their ugly head, and they will appear at a moment in time where we need to just sit back and allow ourselves to feel it, and like you said, and then it floats on, and then you move on, and then the day gets easier and life gets a little bit better in my experience.
And there may even be an impact on the dynamic in your family, in your household, in the train carriage you're on. Like it could be anything. So if you were to read your second eulogy, what would it say about the woman you've become since writing that, and the legacy that you are creating every day, that you continue to be who you are legitimately and in the best way that you can do at that possible moment?
Yeah. So there's two ways I can do this. I can either summarize kind of what the eulogy said, or I did go back and read it and I pulled a couple of paragraphs if you want me to share what those paragraphs said.
This is yours. So,
All right.
whichever, and what do you think would be really good for our listeners?
Yeah. I'm going to read just three little
Yeah.
paragraphs. It'll be less than 2 minutes
Yeah.
here. And this was written over 5.5 years ago when I was in an inpatient or an outpatient treatment program. And I wrote it from the perspective of living a long and prosperous life. And so here is what it said, part of it. This isn't all of it, it was quite long. If you are here today, it is probably because you are honored to have been a part of the life of Ashley Jo, a woman with strength and resilience that most people yearn for, a woman who wasn't afraid to talk about the tough stuff, a woman who loved everyone around her, but most importantly, took the time and energy to learn to love herself during some of the hard moments in life. She was brave, she was courageous, but brave and courageous don't always mean the things the world assigns to them. Sometimes it means asking for help when you need it. Sometimes it means being willing to confront the brutal truth. Sometimes it means being willing to speak unspoken things. And at times, it means being okay with not being okay. If Ashley were here today, she would say, I love you, and want you to hug someone today, to tell those around you that you love them. She would want you to know that it is okay to be exactly who you are, not who anyone else tells you you need to be, that it's okay to feel the counter emotion that goes with every emotion. If you're struggling, she would want you to know it's okay to ask for help. So I urge you, be strong, be courageous, be willing to swim upstream and go against the grain. Share your untold stories because we never know what moment in life may be our last.
Well, you brought a tear to my eye, an opening of my heart, and an immense sense of gratitude for having gone through that program, having lived through your life, and for continuing to share that while you can still make the difference. So for you having written your book, for you having every speaking opportunity that you can to share your glow and your brilliance and your honesty. Sometimes the people who are teaching us about personal development appear to be unreachable. They appear to be perfect. They appear to be all knowledgeable and educated and all of those things. But to me, you're a magnificent teacher. And I'm so glad that our paths have crossed. So someone listening who had just heard what you said, who feels caught between the two eulogies, despair and hope, what would you want them to know about grace, forgiveness, and the power of choosing differently?
Such a good question. Grace and forgiveness. I would tell them, I'm a believer. I would say God's grace covers you too. And so if you would hear your story through the lens of someone else's mouth, if you would give them grace, then you too are deserving of that grace yourself. Absolutely 110% deserving of that grace. The other thing I would say is if you can find the courage to share with just one person what is going on in your life that's leaving you to feel like you're caught between this crossroads, I promise it gets easier. I wish someone had told me that early on. Like right now might feel like you can't survive. Like you don't know what to do. You literally don't know how to keep breathing. But I promise you, if you just reach out and talk to one person, it is going to get easier day by day by day. But you have to be committed and you have to make that choice. No one else gets to decide the path that you take except for you. And if that decision feels paralyzing right now, choose the good path.
Beautiful. Ashley, your story is a luminous example of what happens when courage meets truth. You faced the two eulogies of your life, one written in pain, one written in promise and purpose. And you chose grace, forgiveness, and the daily sparkle of showing up with heart. You remind us that recovery isn't about perfection. It is about presence. It's about community, having those people around you that you can share your life with. It's about adding that little bit of sparkle, that little bit of razzle dazzle, even on the hard days, because that's how light gets back in. To anyone listening, if life has handed you two eulogies, remember the pen is still in your hand. Ashley Jo Janssen, thank you for your honesty, your hope, and for reminding us that even after the storm, we can live suddenly different. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Suddenly Different. I'm Leigh-Anne Sharland, and I'm so grateful you shared your time with me. If you felt a spark, a tear, or a moment of recognition, I hope you'll pass that gift along by sharing this show. Take a deep breath, trust your path, and I'll meet you back here soon.